Hey there, self-care warriors. Welcome back to Self-Care Haven. Today I wanted to let you in on a few secrets regarding counter manipulation and a narcissist. And when I mean counter manipulation, I'm not advocating this as a long-term solution. This should only be used with narcissists who are unavoidable, whether in co-parenting situations, in the workplace, or perhaps mutual friendships. And maybe even in the early stages of dating, if any of you are dating currently, this might help you to figure out whether or not your partner may be a narcissist, or at least try to slow things down so that in the case that they are toxic in any way, whether they're a narcissist or not, you can cut back on your investment early on so that you can be able to detach from them sooner rather than later. The first counter manipulation tactic that I'd like to talk about is documentation. So if you are currently in a workplace situation with a malignant narcissist, it's really important to document. Same goes for co-parenting situations. If you happen to correspond with your ex through email or voicemails or texts, make sure that you are saving those texts, make sure that you're saving those emails, make sure that you're saving those voicemails, because they can tell you a lot about how a narcissist is approaching you and whether that narcissist is in any way interested in abiding by the rules, and of course they often aren't. Narcissists are notorious in co-parenting situations and in high conflict divorces to use things that you've said against you in court. So it's really important that you watch what you say, especially if it's in any form of electronic communication that can be used later on against you in court. So if they try to bait you with a very provocative, very insensitive, invalidating email that attacks you in some way or triggers you in some way, the best response is usually no response or a very minimalist response that acknowledges that you got the email and acknowledges that whatever they're saying is completely false. If they are trying to spread falsehoods through email, make sure that you acknowledge that A, B, and C are completely false, and a simple sentence saying why. And do not try to emotionally manipulate them in any way or counter manipulate them, because all that's going to do is help the case against you. So it's really important that when you're interacting with a narcissist through electronic communication, to keep your cool at all times, even if you feel like you're on the verge of a breakdown, because it's really important to have those documents on hand in case that it ever goes to court, in case you ever need any sort of legal complaint against the narcissist, or maybe if you're in the midst of a high conflict divorce, which you often are with a narcissist, a malignant narcissist. You can have those documents to present your case, and they won't be able to manipulate you into seeming as if you were the crazy one, because you have all those documents. You have all the proof that shows that they are the malignant narcissist, that they're making false accusations, and you can just completely logically and very calmly give that rebuttal without validating their manipulation, without giving in to their manipulation and their emotional ploys to provoke you. This step can be also helpful in the workplace, because if you have a malignant narcissist as a coworker or a boss, you actually have documentation to present should they ever claim that an idea that they stole from you was theirs, or perhaps they manipulated you in some way and you just want proof of that. It's good to document those as well and save those emails. If you find yourself being targeted by a malignant narcissist in the workplace who tends to steal your ideas, what you can do is, if you ever come into contact with them, do not ever give them any inclination that you have these great ideas. Just simply talk with them and have that kind of small talk, and then exit the conversation. Don't give into their kind of slithering ways of trying to get information out of you, trying to exploit your ideas for their own agenda. And if you do happen to let it slip that you have some sort of idea, what you can do is actually email them right after and say, hey, I had a great time discussing this and that with you, so that you have a record of showing that it was your idea in the first place. That's just one example, one context in which documentation can be used for your own good. But obviously, there's There's more benefits to it. If you have any harassing emails, any texts from that coworker, you can show that. If you have any missed calls from that coworker at a time when you're not supposed to be working, I would recommend always let it go to voicemail so that you have a record of them calling you, and also keep a track record of those missed calls as well, so you can present it as documentation that that person was violating those boundaries and calling you at inconvenient times. Document. It can really help, even in situations that are not related to work or co-parenting. It is really important, especially with cyberbullying as well. Take screenshots, save videos. If you see harassing cyberbullying messages, make sure that you collect all the identifying information that you have on that person. If you are writing on a platform where they log IP addresses, log their IP addresses so that if the same IP address comes back, you know that it's the same person. Do whatever you can to just document the hell out of anything that's seemingly ambiguous, harassing, or threatening. Take pictures if you have to of certain things. I know it sounds intense, but when it comes to a malignant narcissist, it is important to document things. Of course, you don't want to break the law, so don't record them if in your state it's against the law to record them without their permission or anything like that. This is just for legal purposes, and always go the legal route when documenting. Things like screenshots, saving texts, voicemails, emails, those are all completely okay to do, because that person gave you that consent basically to, that is the document. They presented you with the document, so there's nothing wrong with doing with saving that document. The second tip that I'm going to share will probably apply more so to the early stages of dating, or in a new relationship where you're not really sure whether that person is toxic or not, or maybe you saw red flags, so you want to cut down on your investment and slow down until you're really sure that this person is a person with empathy and compassion. So I actually read this from an excellent article by Wendy Powell. She is a coach that helps survivors of narcissistic abuse. I will link to the article below, and she wrote an excellent article about how to slow down and how to not let narcissists date you. And it was a wonderful article, and one of the tips that I love sharing is ask as many questions about that person in the early stages of that relationship, as many as they ask you, and don't divulge too much. So be very scarce and minimalist when it comes to the information you share. Don't use anything that can potentially be used against you, especially if you're only a few months into dating this person, or only a few months into the relationship. And don't share like your deep dark secrets. Don't share any big dreams that you would want sabotaged. If you want to mention them in passing, do so, but don't do it in a way that emphasizes what's most important to you until you get to know the person a little bit better. And so Wendy Powell actually mentions how a narcissist in the love bombing stage will actually depend on the fact that you will divulge a lot of information and overshare. And I know as survivors of narcissistic abuse, we tend to overshare, right? Because once we've been through that hell, we want to tell everyone and anyone we know. But once we learn more about it and we understand that most of society doesn't understand this type of abuse yet, what we find is that we seek the safe haven of other survivors who actually understand and who have been there. So I don't recommend ever telling someone you're first dating about the abuse that you've suffered, or the toxic relationships that you've been through. Don't tell them early on, oh, I've been through so much, I want you to be this and that. Don't do that, because that is basically waving a flag at them saying, hey, I've just been, psychologically injured. Come at me, And I'm not saying this in a way to ever shame or blame the victim, because it's never the victim's fault, but what we tend to do is we tend to overshare, and that actually makes us a little bit more vulnerable, because narcissists then know that they have these new, fresh wounds to pick at and play with. I know that sounds gross, but that's what they do. I mean, they're hunters, and we're their prey. And so remember to slow down and don't overshare. Try to ask as many questions as Wendy suggests in her article. Again, please check out that article if you haven't already and share it all over the web, because everyone needs to know about these signs and tips on how to not have narcissists date you. But as long as you're asking as many questions as you're being asked, that can slow down some of the love bombing. So another tip that I would want to share is that if you are dating someone and they are constantly like on your tail, constantly texting you, constantly checking on your whereabouts, don't let them do that. I think it is flattering for us to feel like we're the center of attention, but once we've learned about narcissistic abuse, what often happens is that we get kind of creeped out if someone does that and moves too fast and fast forwards intimacy, because we know that it's a red flag now, and we're here now to hit the pause button. So hit the pause button when it comes to excessive contact. If someone you're dating constantly texts you, try to text back after a few hours rather than right away. Rather than engaging in a whole conversation that lasts forever with them, try to just keep it fairly consistent, but still pretty scarce. Don't indulge too much. Don't give excessive information. Don't tell them every single thing that you're doing at every single minute of the day. Just let them be in the background and live your life while you're dating them, because you don't need them to be the center of your life, and you should not be the center of their universe yet if you're just first dating them. So cut back on excessive contact early on, and that way you don't get too highly invested right away. You don't give into the narcissist's attempt to fast forward you into intimacy. And that's very also helpful because it shows you who's going to stick around. If the narcissist decides like you're too much of a hard conquest and they just kind of go away, or maybe they feel excited by that kind of scarce attention and they start moving in on you even more quickly, you'll still get a sign that it's a red flag. Either way, whether they're trying to fast forward you even more or whether they just go away and disappear, you'll get the sign that either they're not interested in supply that doesn't give them the attention and validation that they seek, or they're way too forward and they have another agenda in mind besides getting to know you, because someone who wants to get to know you will do so slowly and organically. They won't rush into intimacy that quickly. So always kind of hit the pause button, whether it's emotional intimacy or even physical intimacy. Hit that pause button so that you can cut back on some of that investment. Another tip that I would recommend is be very carefully observant as to how the narcissist interacts with others. So I know we have that saying that don't ever trust anyone who's mean to the waiter on the first date, or don't ever trust anyone who's mean to the waitress on the first date. But what we also should remember is don't ever trust anyone who's overly flirtatious and friendly to the waiter or waitress. Don't ever trust anyone who's overly charming and charismatic to everyone that they meet, because usually that is a facade. Usually that is, unless it's coming from a genuine, empathic, high-energy person who's very vibrant because they are genuine, because they are authentic, it's usually that charisma is associated with high levels of narcissism. And by charisma, what I meant to say was charm. Charm is usually associated with high levels of narcissism, because when you have that superficial veneer of charm, it's incredibly one-layered. There's nothing beneath it. There's no kind of genuine warmth that's coming out. And one thing to look out for is a flat affect when they think that no one is looking. If you find that the person you're dating has this kind of flat affect when they don't think anyone is looking, carefully observe that. Sometimes a flat affect can be an indication of depression, but I find that a lot of narcissists who tend to actually have depression, their disorder tends to be comorbid with depression and anxiety and sometimes even OCD. Just look at the way that they interact when they don't have any kind of investment in the activity or any kind of investment in the interaction that you're having. So let's say that you're 3 months into the relationship, maybe they don't need to love bomb you anymore because you're so hooked onto them. Are they exhibiting a flat affect? Are they exhibiting a kind of coldness where there used to be that charming warmth? That is an indicator that there might be something beneath the surface that was not previously seen. Now, it can be difficult to pinpoint who a narcissist is until you get to know them. So obviously these tricks and tips don't necessarily make you immune to meeting narcissists, encountering them, or even being taken advantage of them, but they are useful for times when you feel like you are seeing red flags and you need to hit that pause button to see what you can do to slow down your investment and cut back and detach before you get too involved with a malignant narcissist. These can also be helpful with coworkers, and in terms of co-parenting, obviously it's good to use the gray rock method and document whenever possible. Do not give in to their emotional ploys, their attention seeking. They are just trying to provoke you into seeming like the crazy one. That's their agenda. So always remember that in the back of your mind, and I hope these tips and tricks work. I mean, they seem to be kind of counter-manipulative in a way, but they can be very helpful short-term solutions to narcissists that you can't really avoid. Another thing that I just want to mention briefly, and it might not apply to you depending on your particular relationship, but if you are in the early stages of dating and you do have a connection with them on social media, just briefly look over their timeline and see how they interact with people. See if they have a harem of strangers who are constantly flirting with them. See if they're flirting back. This is very helpful if you're first dating someone, because it can give you a clue as to how monogamous someone might be, and perhaps whether they're emotionally available to even have a relationship with you. And if they do have a very large harem of yes men or yes women who always come around and comment on every photo, that can be a red flag of something that's deeper. It can just be a red flag of emotional unavailability, but at the high level of the spectrum, it could also be an indicator of narcissism if they have a harem of people who they might be romantically involved with or attached to, if they have connections with their exes, and if they have like a collection of ex-partners on their Facebook, that could be a red flag that they haven't really cut ties with anyone in their lives. It can also be an indicator of a person who keeps in touch with their exes too. I mean, they could just have good friendships with their exes, but more often than not, there could be some unresolved issues there. So that's important to think about. Another thing to watch out for is, do they ever mention that their ex has blocked them in some way? Now, of course, exes can block for many different reasons. It might not have to do with the fact that they're toxic, but just observe carefully how they talk about their exes. Obviously, if they're painting them as crazy and they're constantly blaming everything on them, it can be difficult to distinguish a survivor of narcissistic abuse sometimes from the narcissist, but you can tell by the way that they treat you in the long term, because if they tend to mistreat you, the longer you are invested in them, that goes to show that it wasn't their ex that was necessarily the problem. It was probably them. Whereas with a survivor of narcissistic abuse, they will be genuinely traumatized. They may still wonder, like, what did I do wrong to deserve this? They'll be very confused. They'll be very, very confused and lost and scared about what they've been through, and they probably won't be as adamant, at least if this is their first narcissistically abusive relationship. They won't be as adamant about the fact that their partner was to blame. They might gaslight themselves. They might show signs of trauma. They might show signs of not wanting to talk about the trauma. They might show signs of distancing themselves. Now, I want to hear from you. What are some tricks and tips that you have up your sleeve regarding narcissists, and how not to get invested early on, or perhaps how to counteract malignant narcissists in contexts where you can't avoid them, such as co-parenting with them, or in the workplace, or even mutual friendships. I hope to talk to you soon, and until then, take care.